There's nothing worse than reaching out to somebody to do an interview. They send you their headshot in one email. Oh, it's in a Google Doc, so you can access it. You got to send another email to get access to it. Then they send you their bio. They forgot to send their links. Then you got to send another email. That makes you look unprofessional as a podcast host.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
Hey, what's up, podcaster? It's Adam Adams, and we're talking about workflows. Now, if you're thinking about your podcast and thinking about like how hard is my podcast, how tough is my podcast, there's a lot of parts to it that you are probably aware of that get difficult or a little overwhelming, where you have to spend more time and more effort. And so I've got Chris Hines on. Chris actually is an owner at a company called Pod and it's a centralized place for different workflows. And I want to talk to him about what workflows are important. He's been podcasting for over 8 years, and it's like, what workflows matter? Which ones should we focus on? And we can find Pod Central, and how else could we find these things? Like, so that we can make it a little bit easier on us, so that you don't do what's called Podfade. Podfade is when you kind of give up, and we don't want that for you. So let's talk about some workflows. Chris, it's funny because I think I've been trying to get you on the podcast for more than 2 years, and it's finally happened. Cool. How are you today?
Right. It has been a while. I feel like we've been connected on Facebook since I started podcasting. It's been so long, but I love it, man. I'm doing great. I'm excited to just be in this industry of podcasting. I love seeing the growth and how it's evolving. Back when I started in 2015, I didn't know it would be like this, the way it is now with so many shows and so many platforms, and I love it.
Cool. I have a question. Did you build an actual app, Pod Central? Is that like an app on the iPhone and Android?
So it's currently just a web app, but something we're working on for 2024 is making it mobile, which won't be all that hard, to be honest. But I want to get the web app completely concrete and like perfect before we go to mobile. But it's been a beast making something like that. I've wanted to make something to help podcasters for years because it was super hard for me when I first started. So I'm making something that it just would have helped me when I started podcasting.
Yeah. How long did it take? I mean, it sounds like this is years of effort, or how long did it take to make an app? Like if our listener today is considering making an app to serve their people, how long has this one taken you?
I would say about 2 years since I started, and I'm using the no-code platform called Bubble. And I did pay some developers along the way to do some of the things that were just much more complicated to learn. I would say no-code is not that challenging to learn. It just takes focus. So my process was 2 hours every day, at least, for a good 6-month period. That right there really helped me a lot, man. Like that sped up my progress. And I think having that advantage of knowing my industry made building a lot easier. Like I wasn't just building something in an industry I'm not present in.
Yeah. And how much did you have to spend to developers? I've heard that it can be pennies, middle amounts of money, maybe just like hundreds or several thousand. I've also heard that it can be high amounts of money, like hundreds of thousands to multi-millions to pay. So like, how much do you think you've spent on like all of the development with everything?
Oh man, that's such a good question. And I keep track of this very well because I want to be able to give people an honest answer. I've spent in total in the 2 years of building $3,500. Okay. And obviously that's not a lot, right? It's not crazy or anything, but I looked at it like if it was something I could learn how to do on my own and it would just take me a couple weeks, I would rather spend the time. But if it would take me more than 2.5, 3 weeks to do, I was going to just pay somebody. And that approach has served me very well because some of the things the developers went and did, it would have taken me months to figure out, man. So just having somebody I can go to and say, hey, here's the money, build this, that has really made my life a lot easier.
Yeah. How do you find the developers though?
Twitter. Twitter is like home base for building a product. You can connect with so many people that are building their own things, people that can help you build, people that will help you with marketing. And I think that's what's keeping Twitter alive right now is the startup crowd on that platform, because it's just so easy to go on there and find people that do all kind of stuff. It's insane. And I don't think Facebook has that kind of reach. And I think the problem with LinkedIn is everybody you connect with is trying to sell you. But on Twitter, you can just say, hey, I need help with this. And you'll have 10 people that reach out, give you advice.
What about that new platform, Threads, I think it might be called, that's supposed to be replacing Twitter?
I don't think it has a real staying power just yet. I think all the social platforms we have a place. Like LinkedIn is for the more serious professional crowd. Facebook is for family and friends. Twitter is where you have different circles of people where you can just talk in public and you will make friends from people that like the stuff you like. Instagram's for showing a lifestyle. I think Threads, before it has staying power, it has to find its thing, right? Like I know if I want to find out about news, I can go on Twitter and look in the trending topics section and I'm going to find news. I can search a hashtag and see what people are talking about. Hashtags are not like great, but I just don't think Threads has found its, I would say, niche in social media just yet. Like all these different platforms serve a different purpose in our lives. And Threads is like the new thing that's supposed to replace Twitter, but I don't think it's there just yet.
Got it. You've been doing podcasting for like 8 years. I want to focus most of today on different ways that we can automate, systemize, make things a little bit easier on us so we don't podfade, so we don't leave what we need to do. Because focusing on our podcast and staying diligent in it can really grow our listener base, our influence, our company. And so if we don't do it, if we fail, if we stop doing it because it got too difficult, then we really lose out on all those benefits. So curious, you as somebody who's created an online app, a place where everything can be centralized, and had 8 years figuring this out, probably a lot on your own, it sounds like. What have you learned? I'll ask this. What are some of the top things that the listener, another podcaster, needs to automate?
I would say number one is collaboration with your team. If you have just an editor, collaborate with them. If you have a co-host, if you have a designer, anybody that you are connecting with, you want to have that close work relationship with them. You want to make it really, really easy. If you don't, that really can slow you down in your process. Okay. What I've learned being an editor too is so many things fall through the gaps just because you play email tag, or one person likes Slack, the other one likes Facebook Messenger, right? So the people you work with are just so important. And again, if you don't have a big team, which most people don't, I get it, but even your co-host, your one editor, your one designer, just make sure you have a good connection with them in terms of communication, because that's going to make getting the content out there a lot easier.
What are a couple options for us to be able to collaborate and communicate better with our teammates, our editors, or our co-hosts?
I would say number one, choose one platform to communicate on. I worked with a podcast 1.5 years ago, and this company, to give a perspective, they have a show where a new episode comes out every day, and it's a different host on that same show. So they have 7 different hosts for one show. Their ad spend monthly for the show was around 10 grand. So they have the money to do pretty much whatever they need to do. Their problem, one of their biggest issues, is they would talk on Google Docs, emails, they would use Slack, they use Facebook. So they use like 6 different platforms to communicate. I think it's better to communicate in one place, because instead of everybody having their favorite platform, you just have one platform. Let's just get it all in one place so nothing ever gets missed. So whether that's going to be Slack, or it's a Facebook chat, or it'll be email, choose that one platform that works for you and your team and just stick with that.
Okay. What about other top things that need to be automated outside of just the narrowing and streamlining to one communication place to be able to collaborate? What other things are podcasters missing, or what did you miss 8 years ago?
Man, 8 years ago, I was going to say AI before you said 8 years ago, because a lot of podcasters are against AI, like agency owners too. It's like, I don't want to use that. I don't want to use any automation tools. And this is the thing. You use the AI tools to speed up the process, not replace it. So instead of you spending an hour and a half or 2 hours writing the title, the show notes, figuring out keywords, you can use AI tools to give you that stuff and then just iterate and make small changes if you need to. Because the AI is good enough to where it'll give you something that's pretty good to work with as a foundation. You just improve it and make it better, put your own spin on it, add your own sauce to it, and you'll be good to go. I see a lot of content creators in general that are against the AI movement. And I would say find your way to use it and implement it into your workflow. Don't be afraid of it.
How about a third thing that we can use for automation? What's a thing that podcasters miss when it comes to making it easy on themselves?
This is the biggest one. And this one changed my podcasting career. And I get compliments on this all the time. So it's my personal favorite. And that is booking interviews. There's nothing worse than reaching out to somebody to do an interview and they send you their headshot in one email. Oh, it's in a Google Doc, so you can access it. You got to send another email to get access to it. Then they send you their bio. Oh, they forgot to send the links. Then you got to send another email. That part of the workflow really makes you look unprofessional as a podcast host if it's all complicated and all over the place. When I interview celebrities or entrepreneurs with 9-figure business, like these people are making big money. So I'm not even talking to them. I'm talking to their representatives. If I make the workflow too complicated, I lose the opportunity to work with that guest. So in terms of booking your interviews, try to condense that as much as possible. Like just make it as seamless as you can, because it comes off as you're professional and prepared to whoever is being a guest on the show, even their team. They'll refer you to other people because your workflow is way better than other podcasters. And again, this one completely changed the game for me, like completely.
So tell us a little bit more about that. What is a couple of ways that I can book interviews in a more streamlined ways?
So the first thing you want to do is figure out what you need to get from that guest. We know that the biggest part of it is booking the date and time and the virtual location for the interview, right? So that's already the main thing. But what I think podcasters miss is getting the content you'll need for your post-production process before the interview. Like, don't do it after, do it before. You know you're going to need a headshot for social media content. You know you're going to need their bio to read it into the show or put it in the show notes. You know you're going to need their social media links for the call to action. Get all of that before the conversation. Before they even put a time on your calendar, get all of that stuff. So by the time you get to that part, they don't have to do anything else, right? You obviously get their email when they book that time. So I would suggest if you're going to use a form strategy, you can do that. Send them a form that they can just use to complete all of that stuff. Hey, here's a form to be a guest on the show. After you complete this, I'll send you a link to book the interview. That's one simple way to do it. And that could be free. That could be done through Google Forms. And once they've done that, you can get their email and you send them a link to your Calendly. That's simple. It could be that easy. Now, the process isn't as strenuous and exhausting for both sides.
Yeah. So is there anything else that you can think of that new podcasters might miss when they could make it a little easier on themselves?
One of the things that helped me, this is something I wish I had when I first started, because I did a lot of co-hosting shows. Now my content is more solo or interview based. I used to have co-hosts on my shows. We would do roundtable episodes and stuff. So I think it's good to have a planner just for the topics you're going to cover, some of the key points on those topics, for research and data, any statistics you want to talk about. And if you're interviewing somebody, you want to have a planner for the questions on the episode, some of the topics they want to talk about. Like if they have a book, you want to know the key points of that book that they want to cover and have that right in front of you while you do the interview. And just having that is great, because if I have co-hosts, we all can have a basic document that shows us this is what the show is about. It makes the content a lot smoother, right? Like if you look at ESPN and all those shows, it flows so smoothly because on those tables, all those papers you see, that's a production list. Like that's all their content is right there. They have notes and stuff and all of that from the night before. If you're trying to be a high-level podcaster, that's the kind of approach you need to take. Same with your guests. If they want to talk about this topic, here's a topic, here are the questions you have under that topic. All right. And having that, I'm really big on preparation. Like if you notice, all these steps are about preparing, because I think when you prepare at this level at every step of the process, when you actually do content, it sounds so much better. It's so much smoother. Like people ask me why I don't use script. I don't need to. I don't need the whole script word for word because I have so much preparation right in front of me.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, like thinking about this planner, can it be an online planner or does it need to be a paper planner? What does that look like?
I think the paper planners are great if you're doing solo content. Like for me, I use sometimes Post-it notes and I'll put that right on the front of my camera before the interview or something. That's my personal strategy. But I had to build this in the Pod Central. I'm not trying to plug the product here, people. I'm just saying, like, I'm making a digital version of that now. So it's just easier to share because I do think that is what is necessary to take podcasting to the next level. To make better content, to have better interviews, to do better roundtables, to work with your co-hosts better. It's better that when everybody has the show planned and right in front of them. I think they call it a set list for TV shows and stuff. I think that's the name of it. I haven't been on too many Hollywood sets, but
let me talk more about that or ask more about that. Let's just pretend we've got a co-host and a guest, And I'm wondering, do you come up with the questions you're going to ask the guest? A lot of questions. A, do you come up with it before you go to the episode itself? B, who comes up with it? Is it a combination of the two co-hosts, or does the guest send them to you? Or is it just one of the co-hosts needs to figure that out? Lots of follow-up questions on this, because I think that the listeners probably got a lot of questions. If you got some questions ready to go, what happens if there's not enough time to go over them? Yeah, it's hard to put this in a great single question. What I really want to understand better about how the planner works if I've got a co-host and a guest.
Yeah, so for me, I think number one, I always tell people it's good to prepare questions from what your guests tell you they want to talk about. In the booking process, one of the first things you should be doing is looking at that guest and saying, hey, what is it you want to cover on the show? And my main go-to is, what value do you want to provide to the audience? What's the transformation you want to give during your episode? Then they'll tell you, I want to talk about topic A. Perfect. Now you and the co-host collaborate on the questions you want to ask. I'll ask these, you ask those, and we can work off of each other. I think that makes it easier when you work on the questions together. That way you aren't stepping over each other's toes. That's why the collaboration is so great. During the interview, you don't have to ask every question.
Okay.
Like sometimes I'll have like 8 questions listed, but you only get to ask 3. It's fine. You don't have to ask every question. For me, sometimes I will bring people back onto the show 6 months later and we'll do another interview and just pick up where we left off. If it's that good of content, we just keep going that way. So I just think the planner is a great way to ensure your content is better. Right? Like on that planner, you're going to have key points and data. I think this is especially important if you're on one of these business shows and you're talking about something that is more data focused that's attached to it so that you can back up your statements. Whatever claim you're making, you want to be able to back that up with some data in front of you. So it's just a way to stay more organized.
So it sounds like for the most part, you and your co-host come up with the questions together. And for the most part, you would plan to ask a certain amount of them. And you're going to need to give yourself grace if you can't ask each of them. And I've got a good example, I think, for the listener right now. Ultimately, I've only really asked Chris Hines, our guest today, I've only really asked him one main question. And it was about the top things that need to be automated. And then I just had follow-up questions from his answers. So ultimately, we've spent a half an hour-ish on one question.
Yeah.
So, and I remember I used to host more in-person meetings. Before COVID, I would host multiple meetings each week, every Tuesday, every Wednesday, every Thursday, and in different cities. And then I'd host conferences with hundreds of people every quarter or so. And in all of that, I learned something that really ultimately came from working with panel discussions. Panel is like when you have 3 or 4 different people as experts. And I remember that other people would be like, all right, we've got 2 minutes. Maybe we've got 2 questions. We've got time, they might say, to ask 2 more questions. And I realized if you got 2 minutes, you don't have time for any more questions because it would average where it would be more than 5 minutes a question. And so once we finish a topic, I wouldn't spend the time asking another question. And I think that happens also when we're just wrapping up an episode. Let's say we're at the very, very end of the episode and we mistakenly ask one last question like this. We might say, what's the best advice you have for a podcaster? Or we might say any other question. And what's going to happen is it'll take like, on average, more than 5 minutes. And so if you only got like 2 minutes, you don't have time to ask another question. So I think that is necessary to pinpoint. So let's go over these top things that need to be optimized, automated, optimized/automated. I'm trying to make up a word here. Optimated. That's a good word. Chris, you can't take that. I made it up. Sorry. My listener knows, they heard it here. So first, you said that you need to have a singular place where everybody feels comfortable to collaborate. The second thing you mentioned to automate things, make it easier on ourselves, is to embrace AI, artificial intelligence. To love it, to embrace it, to use it, to partner with it, and not to shun it. Because one of the things that you mentioned is it will title an episode for you. They're even editing video. They're even editing audio these days for you in many cases. It'll title it. It'll write your whole show notes. It'll take the entire transcript. It'll give you the key takeaways. It'll do all of these things. It's being able to do that. And the third thing you mentioned was having an automation around booking your interviews. I use Calendly and a template through my Gmail to get people on my podcast. But whatever we need to do, we need to find a way to do that. And the last thing that you mentioned with booking interviews, you had a key takeaway that was about making sure you're getting your headshot, bio, and links before you ever do the interview. I thought that was a good takeaway as well. And then the fourth thing after collaborate, AI, and booking is the planner. So if it's just you mentioned maybe we could do a paper planner or automatic. But if we have a lot of people involved, the paper is going to get too challenging. So we probably ought to use something online. And that will be a place where we put research, data, figure out the guests, the topics, the books, the ideas. And then the last takeaway that I really was getting from you is that more preparation can be beneficial for a podcaster. I wanted you to talk a little bit more about the preparation as we end off, about why do you prep and how to prep. You've given some tips, but I want to talk about why to prep and how to prep as soon as we get back from our quick messages.
Hey, my friend, as you know, this episode is sponsored by my company, growyourshow.com. We want you to be able to have the best tools at your disposal without costing you a whole arm and a leg. So right now you can get a free list of vetted equipment that like mics, mixers, webcams, sound treatment, editing software, everything that you need. I created the whole PDF with direct purchase links just to save you time and money, to help it be more convenient for you. So this free PDF will help you skip all the guesswork. If it's on there, it's vetted and approved by yours truly. And if it's not on there, it's probably not worth the money. So go ahead and get yours at growyourshow.com/PDF. Let's get back into the show.
We're back with Chris Hines, and he's shared so much about ways of automating, collaborate, AI, booking interviews, using a planner. And I want to talk a little bit about how to finish automating this. So Chris, do you remember where we were going to go when we came back from the break?
Yeah, just going into a lot more of the tools and tips as far as being more efficient in this process. I think that the workflows overall for me and being prepared is just about being efficient. I've learned that my content is a lot better. Like before I go and sit down and record, I need to know what my topic is, what my key points are, if I have any research to back up those key points. I think that when you present content in that fashion, then it just sticks so much harder. For me, one of the main things I do is I have the topic and I have a key point that ties to each step. So I have like maybe 4 or 5. And then under those, I'll have either data that backs up what I'm saying or a story, right? And that makes my content 10 times better because it resonates with people and it'll teach them something.
Can you share any story that is stuck to a piece of content, is there time for you, the amount of time you've got for this interview, to just share a story with the listener and show them what the takeaway was so that we can utilize stories as well?
Yeah. So one of my favorite stories to tell when it comes to this whole workflow stuff and why it matters so much to me, because when I first started podcasting in my first 6 months, at this point in time in my life, it was all basketball. I was training. I was still playing in college. I was playing on a pro-am team. I had a spot to coach a team as well. Everything was basketball. I was blogging and everything. So I started a basketball podcast. And the show was really successful really, really early. I mean, immediately. And that was amazing because it led me to getting sponsored super early and to finding celebrity guests really, really early. So I had the chance to interview Darius Miles and Corey Maggette. If you don't know, they were guys that played, I would say they're veterans in NBA, played for the LA Clippers. So at this point in time, I was just high, oh my God, I'm interviewing NBA players. My goal at that point in time was to have this big media brand and podcasting and basketball focus, kind of like Blue Wire Pods is now. One day I woke up and I tried to turn my computer on and it just wouldn't turn on. And it was a really old MacBook, so I knew this would happen. And I kept telling myself, maybe I should prepare for this computer to die on me because it might die. This was like a 9-10-year-old computer. And I kept hitting it to turn it on. Eventually, the computer turns on. And as soon as it turns on, I start looking at my files immediately, where is my content? And I don't know how it happened to this day. I have no idea, but it erased all my content. All the files on my computer were gone. All the content I just recorded was gone. So I preach workflow so much because there is nothing more painful than having really good content and you didn't save it correctly because of your workflows. And at that point in time, obviously, I wasn't even doing interviews correctly. I was just too excited to do it. So I wasn't prepared for anything. So I don't want anybody else to have to run into something like that where they hit their peak in a specific niche or market to where they can climb up the mountain a lot faster. I kind of had a fast way in, but right after that happened, my show fell off a cliff because I lost content. I didn't lose just those 2 interviews. I lost a ton. It was 10. So that is when I learned that workflows are important. So now part of my workflow is to save my content in 3 different places, book my interviews more properly. I even do follow-ups. I have something I call a podcast alumni program where people that have been on my show, I have their email and their name and stuff, and I just reach out to them periodically to see how they're doing, what they're working on, what they're promoting, all of that stuff. And these little strategies here and there are the things that help you long-term in your journey of business and creating content.
Awesome. I like the alumni program. It seems interesting. How is that working for you?
It's been amazing. Now that I'm working on Pod Central, I'm just going back through all the people I've had on the show over the years, even on my other shows, and just contacting them. These are authors, these are coaches, speakers. Some of them are celebrities, so many people. I didn't realize how many interviews I've done until I looked at my HubSpot account and I was like, oh my God, this is a lot of people. So it's been amazing to have something like that. And even with a platform like Pod Central, having something where it's centralized and it's in one place, it's really just completely changed my life, to be honest.
Love it. Chris, thanks for jumping on. Your podcast is in the show notes. The link is also, the website is in the show notes, and any social media that you wanted to share is already there. Thank you again. Hey, and to the listener, every other episode is a solo episode. So this was an interview, and I got a solo episode ready and queued up for you. Don't go anywhere. I'll see you right there.
I really don't say this nearly enough. I don't mention this, and I feel horrible because it's a great resource for you to be able to take your podcast to the next level. And it's simply a free resource that I don't need your email or anything. It's just a podcasting course that I created that is ended up putting in the very first 6 episodes of this podcast. So if you haven't checked it out, definitely going to want to just check out those first 6 episodes, see how they can help you improve your podcast, get in front of more people, and have a better result where you're making more money through the podcast, etc. So much can happen after you listen through episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So if you haven't done it, Go do it now. And by the way, if you're subscribed, you'll keep hearing more great content. So to those of you who are, I'll see you on the next episode.